Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, help us out and click subscribe to show your support. And while you're at it, if you are a Facebook user, make sure that you check out Wrestler Unstoppable, totally free, available right now on Facebook. If you are sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest, greatest wrestling video game every year, stop doing it. Take on Wrestler Unstoppable, totally free on Facebook. Create your own wrestler, join companies, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline pay-per-views, even create your own corporation, all available through Wrestler Unstoppable, totally free on Facebook. And if you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, we are available on patreon.com/Pro Wrestling Podcast, where for the month of October, anyone who signs up to be a $25 a month contributor will be able to co-host an episode of Going Live with myself on one of our Saturday night episodes. In addition, if you're not wanting to drop $25, we get it, man. $25 is a lot of money. If you want to be a $10 contributor, your name gets put into a drawing, and one $10 contributor will be able to go live with us on an episode as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. I'm doing something a little crazy and out of the norm for me tonight. I'm going head-to-head with Raw. I don't know why. I'm not even watching Raw right now. I'll watch it on replay on my DVR later, but I wanted to do an episode. I did not get a chance to do a live episode this past weekend. I had some major technical difficulties in my personal life, which made it so I was trapped in a small town in central Pennsylvania rather than being home, and I was not able to get you guys an episode, and I feel bad about that. So I wanted to get something out to you right away and just keep the positive vibes going. We've been doing so well on the Pro Wrestling Podcast. You guys have been great. For those who don't know or have not been listening to the podcast recently, there is a top female wrestler of all time tournament going on right now, and I'm happy to say that as of tonight, round 2 of the tournament, so it was a 256 woman tournament. We got it down to 128. 64 matches are live right now for round 2 on frowrestling.com. If you've never been to our site, it is the home of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. Get there, check it out. There are 7 voting blocks. There are 64 matches, and you guys have put together some amazing pairings based on your first round matches. Pretty much most of the fodder, low-level talent that you really just wouldn't want to see in the tournament sometimes is already gone. You guys did a great job of weeding that stuff out. What we have left are some really intriguing women's matches. Many of them, probably all of them, just about all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them, never taking place in a ring before. So I'd be curious to see how you guys vote on those and see who moves on to round 3. And if you have never called into our Pro Wrestling Sound Off line, what are you waiting for? Get on that phone, call us with your questions, your comments, your concerns, anything you want to contribute to the Pro Wrestling Podcast. Our Pro Wrestling Sound Off line is at 267-642-1160, where it is a talk-to-text service. So you give us your comments, your questions, whatever, and it will take your voice, turn it into a message, and send it to me right now live on our podcast. So I would like to incorporate as much stuff as I can from you guys directly into the show. You guys are the backbone of the show, and we want to make sure we include your thoughts, your comments, and everything as much as we possibly can. I'm going to get started right away, though, talking about all the news, the rumors, everything people have been buzzing about since last week when I did our last episode. And again, I apologize. I didn't get our Saturday night episode up this week. For those I have people who are already sending me a message like, dude, what happened? I went up to the mountains and my clutch just fell out of my car, so I couldn't get home in time to do our episode. So it was not a lot of fun. My car's still up there getting work done, getting the clutch fixed. I'll have to go back up next weekend and pick it up. So we'll have to see how that works out for me. Getting into the wrestling news of the day. So WWE is scouting the independents, and they have their eyes focused on 1, possibly 2, and interestingly enough, 2 talents that are very much connected. And by that, what I'm talking about is Ricochet, currently wrestling as Prince Puma on Lucha Underground and as Ricochet in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He recently finished up what looks like his last tour with New Japan Pro Wrestling, cutting a promo afterwards. For those who watch, New Japan Pro Wrestling on Access Television, at the end of every show, they do these interviews, these press conferences with the Japanese media. And during that press conference, he made it very clear in the ring, he cut a promo at the end of his tag team match. He was one half of the Junior Tag Team Champions, losing their title to Roppongi Vice 3.0 or whatever they're calling this new combination. And he thanked the fans for everything they've done for him. And it sounded very much like he's looking to head out and move on to greener pastures. So the situation with Ricochet is, in the United States, he's got a little bit of restriction on what he can do. And what I mean by that is that his contract with Lucha Underground does not expire until 90 days after the last episode of Season 3 of Lucha Underground airs, which will be this week. It's actually 2 days from now, Thursday night, you'll see Wednesday night, the last episode of Lucha Underground Season 3. And then 90 days from there, which will take you to January 18th, 2018, he will be able to finally appear on an American television broadcast. And many are speculating that is WWE, that he would go right to NXT and become a major player on their programming as soon as he arrives. The interesting thing is the other talent that is apparently in negotiations to come to World Wrestling Entertainment, not a stranger to their ring, as they competed in the Mae Young Classic, and that would be Tessa Blanchard, daughter of Tully Blanchard, daughter of the famous Four Horsemen member, who competed in the Mae Young Classic, who really is a phenomenal female talent and happens to be the fiancée of Ricochet. Very interesting that both of them would be highly talked about right now and potentially heading to WWE. Speaking of WWE, one of the big stories this past week was the backstage firing of Jimmy Jacobs after he took a selfie with the Bullet Club when they did their invasion angle at Raw. For those who don't know how this works, Jimmy Jacobs was one of the biggest creative minds behind some of the best storylines you've seen, the Festival of Friendship and things of that nature. Some of the other pushes that you've really enjoyed, a lot of those come from the mind of Jimmy Jacobs. When it comes to booking, he's extraordinarily connected with the fans. I think he has a good barometer on what people are looking for, what fans like to see. And when his storylines have been run, they've been some of the most successful storylines of the year. And now he's gone from WWE simply for taking that selfie with the Bullet Club. WWE has this high and mighty perspective that anybody who welcomes the outside, the competition, or anything of that nature is somehow doing something wrong. Jimmy Jacobs was a member of the Ring of Honor family for a very long time. Him taking a picture with good friends of his in the business, no different than Sheamus taking a picture with Rey Mysterio and posting on Twitter last week. Except that Rey Mysterio didn't do an invasion angle, which, by the way, on the topic of the invasion angle, they didn't enter the arena, and apparently it was filmed significantly long before Raw took place, so it wasn't even really an invasion. So there was no threat to the WWE brand. So at the end of the day, WWE firing a talent, a huge creative force in their company, over something so stupid, seems like a complete lack of long-term thinking in WWE's part. And here's the real crazy part. At the Ring of Honor shows over the weekend, he was there at Ring of Honor with the Bullet Club taking more selfies, because this is absolutely ridiculous. Now he's actually even got a t-shirt out on Pro Wrestling Tees making fun of his firing from WWE, which is absolutely ludicrous. I hope that either Ring of Honor, which is most likely, if not Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, which would be very helpful, or even Lucha Underground, somewhere somebody signs this guy to let him continue his creative thought process, because there's not a promotion in the world that wouldn't be better off tomorrow having Jimmy Jacobs signed today. That's just my opinion. In an update to the Neville situation, apparently what happened, everybody now knows Neville has apparently quit WWE despite the fact that they have not granted his release as of yet. Typically these things will play out long, but my understanding is Neville has a relatively long contract still with WWE, and they can make him live out that contract and just sit him on the sideline, pay him his downside guarantee, and not allow him to perform for anybody. And if he's not careful, that may be what they choose to do. Apparently he wanted to leave because, one, obviously he was not happy with losing to Enzo. He didn't like his position on the card, and he's still frustrated that the Cruiserweight Championship match he had with Austin Aries at WrestleMania was excluded from the WrestleMania DVD collection, meaning that he doesn't get any royalties from the sale of that DVD when was one of the best matches on the card. It is absolutely ludicrous that in an age where DVD extras are so bountiful that WWE would eliminate any matches, any of them, from their DVD releases. That's absolutely ridiculous. The only methodology or thought process I can think of that makes any sense for not putting all your matches on a pay-per-view DVD collector set would be if you were going to release like some kind of ultimate collector's edition version and then include them there to try to pop the sales twice. But at this point, that's not going to happen. It's ridiculous that he's not on the collection. I think this is a situation where, yes, cooler heads should have prevailed. Neville, in all seriousness, should have been strategically positioned to be at the top or mid-top of the Raw roster instead of toiling in the Cruiserweight division. That's how good he is. If Finn Balor can challenge Brock Lesnar for the World Championship, why can't Neville? He's every bit as good and as big and as talented. Makes no sense to me. But the other update to the situation is that people stated that he had walked out on Raw only hours before the show went live. Apparently that is not the case. He was not at the weekend's house shows before the show took place and then never even showed up to Raw, and they had to rewrite it. Now, he was scheduled to lose to Enzo. We do know that. We know that the decision to put the belt on Kalisto was a lot of it driven by the fact that it was the birthday of Eddie Guerrero, but definitely not a good situation. And now, what we're hearing in the news now is that there are multiple talents that are interested in being released from their WWE contracts. You know, Austin Aries put out a statement this week online, and I apologize to the people who follow along in the topics coming to Pro Wrestling Podcast on our webpage. I know I'm going a little off tangent here for what was coming in, but I hope you enjoy that. The reality is that Austin Aries put up a post talking about how he makes more money on the independent scene than he did in WWE in a 5-week period. That's pathetic. WWE is the biggest company in the world. They've got the most money in the world, and they're so worried about the return to their investors that they aren't paying their talent in a way that makes their talent want to stay. They also have no idea what to do with them creatively. Here's the reality. I know some people think that the brand extension and separating into Raw and SmackDown brands is a bad idea. I do understand that because there needs to be more crossover. But I actually would not be opposed to an additional split and creating a whole nother show on your network based around more talents. You have so many talents under contract. It's ridiculous. We don't get to see them all. If you're not going to split into another brand, give us something like, make the main event an actual legitimate show, not just 2 jobber matches. Make it an hour-long program with fantastic action, taking your mid-card guys and giving them some exposure in some real feuds. And don't run them on Raw. Take them off the Raw roster. Take them off the SmackDown roster. Put them on the main event or put them on whatever show you want to put on the network and let them have their own space to grow. There's no reason somebody should have to leave the company, make a bigger name for themselves, and come back like Drew Galloway when they're as talented as they are. It absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. The women need their own show. That's how good they've become. And WWE continues to fail in the booking sense of wrestling. Speaking of the things WWE refuses to do, one of them is they are refusing to let Brock Lesnar fight in UFC. He definitely has interest in facing Jon Jones. It's a situation that is not going to happen anytime soon, and a big part of that has to do with his contract situation. He is not going to be a free agent until August of 2018. That's a long time to wait for Jon Jones to fight him. And the reality is this. WWE refusing to let him fight is not because they're threatened by the UFC brand. It's not because it's a competitive product. It's because the last time Brock Lesnar fought in UFC, he failed a drug test by the United States Anti-Doping Association, and it made WWE look bad, having one of their prime stars fail a drug test for a different sport, and then they didn't do anything overly punitive to him for the failed drug test. He would still have to get back into drug testing protocol to be able to get cleared to compete at that show anyways, but it's still very frustrating that we probably won't get to see that amazing matchup because they're not going to let him because of the reputation he garnered with his failed drug test last time. Roman Reigns was on Twitter this week having some interesting dialogue about his dream match for WrestleMania. And for those who don't know, the dream match for Roman Reigns is to face off against his cousin, The Rock. And I'll be honest with you, the way Roman Reigns has been built and the way The Rock gets the pop from the crowd, I think having a match with his cousin, though I think it would be incredibly entertaining. I think the build-up would be fantastic. One of the best talkers in the industry, great worker, going against this young lion who's, cut from the same cloth. But the reality is Roman Reigns can't speak very well on the mic. He can't work as well as The Rock can. He can work great. I don't want to trash his work ethic. I think he actually does a pretty good job. But I'd be concerned about how this match would come off, especially since you would know that Roman Reigns would have to win the match or the match makes no sense. And I would be concerned that the popularity of The Rock would really cause a problem for Roman Reigns. I mean, people would not take him with the same seriousness if he were to beat The Rock. Moving on, more WWE news. Talents at the Performance Center. It's a big deal this week. They released a list of just dozens of people who are working out at the Performance Center having tryouts. But 3 names in particular really shock me. And one, I don't know if they're working out. I think they're there because their girlfriend has a WWE developmental deal, and that's Austin Aries, who left the company only a few months ago, but has been at the Performance Center a lot recently. Even been spotted working out at the Performance Center. The next one is Serena Deeb. So for those who don't know, she was in CM Punk's Straight Edge Society. She's the girl who got her hair shaved off. She's been working there as a guest trainer. But the most intriguing one to me is former TNA knockout, the former multiple-time knockouts champion, Madison Rayne, is working out at the Performance Center. And I think that would be a huge get for WWE. Someone with an extensive history in the wrestling business, very seasoned athlete, coming in would immediately offer some really solid bolstering to the women's division on any brand. I don't care what brand it is. Hopefully they sign Madison Rayne to a very good deal and keep her in the company. I think she would be at a fantastic get. I really would like to see them get Angelina Love and Velvet Sky as well. I think all 3 of them, really, for fans who are diehard wrestling fans, you know, they talk about how Vince McMahon was shocked when AJ Styles walked out at the Royal Rumble and got such a huge reaction. I understand the women don't typically get that big of a reaction, but if you could see, almost like the Undisputed Era in NXT, when they show up, Vince McMahon has no understanding of how popular Ring of Honor is, and when they walked out, they got a huge reaction. I think the fans, if you let the beautiful people walk out together, all 3 of them, on a NXT show or a Raw or a SmackDown, I think the real fans, the ones who still go to the shows, because let's face it, mainstream people don't really go to the shows. It's really the diehards at this point. The attendance has been so low. They would all know them, and they would pop for them, and they would immediately bring some legitimacy to any female brand. In addition, because they'd be a faction, custom-made faction, they could do so much for helping either the heels or the babyfaces in a long-standing feud. And since it seems like, at least right now, the whole horsewomen thing is kind of on hold, it would be a great placeholder to get people ready for that 4 horsewomen match that now is being rumored for WrestleMania, as opposed to the singles match between Charlotte and Ronda Rousey. I still think we're going to get to see Charlotte Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania, and it may even be in a main event position. I really believe that. So we'll have to wait and see. But when it comes to wrestling pay-per-views, and yes, the horsewomen match was originally rumored to take place at Survivor Series, that sounds like that may be off. But what is not off is the conversation about the main event of Survivor Series, which, to my surprise, a few months ago, Jinder Mahal was talking about what his dream matches in WWE would be, and one of those was to face Brock Lesnar, and now it looks like the Raw Universal Champion may just get that match against the WWE Champion at Survivor Series. Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal is supposedly the headline match for Survivor Series. We'll have to wait and see how they start to build that. They better start building it soon with Brock's limited appearance dates, but I actually would be interested to see that match, and I hope some way Jinder Mahal defeats Brock Lesnar. I think it would be fantastic. I don't think they'll do that. I think it'll be some kind of schmoz ending. I think fans going into the pay-per-view would know that ahead of time, which kind of takes away from the awesomeness of the match. The only other thing I could see them doing, because they are talking about these two facing each other, is putting them into a traditional Survivor Series match, Raw versus SmackDown, both world champions in the match, and have the final 2 competitors come down to them. So there's no titles on the line, and, you know, losing a Survivor Series traditional match won't hurt either one of their characters more than an actual loss would. So definitely gonna have to keep our eyes on that. That really holds the promise of something could be very special. Something else that is very special is Natalya commenting this past week on her anticipation of the return of Paige to the WWE, and she said she can't wait for Paige to return. She's looking forward to facing her in the ring again. She's had great matches with her before, and whenever they face off, they're always great together in the ring, and I think that would be a great location to bring her back. Bring her back to SmackDown. Let her get in there with Natalya now that she didn't lose the championship to Charlotte just yet. I think she will in short order, but if you brought Paige back and let her feud with Natalya for a little while, Charlotte could win that championship in January at the Rumble or sometime thereafter and still build to a Ronda Rousey match, which I think is the long-term booking plan. WWE 2K19, not 18, 19, had interesting news this week. So apparently, the developers of the game have contacted none other than the Young Bucks, Ring of Honor's World Tag Team Champions, who, and this is the part that I find so fascinating, and this is why Vince McMahon needs to open up his ears and listen to what fans really want. Apparently, the Young Bucks are the highest, most custom-created characters in the Creator Wrestler mode in the entire game. And because of that and their unique moveset and the moves that the fans want to do, the WWE's video game developers wanted to bring the Young Bucks in and have them do motion capture information for the WWE 2K19 game that will be coming out next year. I guess the developers don't understand what's going on right now with the Young Bucks and WWE, because that is just not going to happen. Cease and desist orders and everything like that. They actually debuted a new hand signal, which was just like the Too Sweet, except they put the pinky down, so they're holding it up and you could tell what they're doing, but now they can still say Too Sweet and use a different hand gesture, and they're not violating any kind of copyright infringement, because their issues with WWE just keep going on and on. It's absolutely ridiculous. At the end of the shows this past weekend, the Ring of Honor, the big Global Wars shows, the Bullet Club came out, they did this selfie with Jimmy Jacobs, and they really were cutting some promos on WWE about what they try to take away from and everything else. The interesting thing for me was listening to Cody talk about how he thinks he's the biggest draw in the business. Roman Reigns responded to that on Twitter, making fun of it, saying if he didn't draw 100,000 people, then he's just blowing smoke, and I get where Reigns is coming from, but what I don't think Reigns' understanding is, the people that they draw with those 100,000 people crowds, that sounds great on paper, but how many of those people watch Raw every single week, and then SmackDown every week, and then Ring of Honor, and then New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Impact Wrestling, and Lucha Underground, and any other little scrappy, no-name wrestling promotion you can find on your local television? Or they go online and watch What Culture Pro Wrestling, or they go on Fight application before there were issues and watched Evolve shows, or they go to Chikara, or they go to AAW, or Wrestle Circus, or any other of an unbelievable quantity of promotions out there. What WWE and Roman Reigns don't understand, when Cody says he's the biggest draw, he is the main event anywhere he goes. So he's not headlining WrestleMania, which, by the way, is the only time they drew 100,000 people. Otherwise, hey, Roman Reigns, you're lucky to draw 2,000 people at a show right now. So before you start bragging about your numbers, yes, I think Cody could draw just as well as you do if he was given the right venue and the right promotion. But I digress. The fact that that was even a part of the conversation with the Young Bucks and the Bullet Club was just fabulous. I love that on one company's show, they have no problem having a rivalry with a competitive company. It's almost like Monday Night Wars, except they're not anywhere nearly as big as WCW was as far as a threat, but it still makes for entertaining conversation. House of Hardcore has now, Tommy Dreamer has signed a distribution deal. Their shows will be going to a streaming service. That's a service that is excellent for House of Hardcore. I'm glad to see that their brand is growing to the point that I think that it'll get much more exposure. And if you are not familiar with the House of Hardcore product, Tommy Dreamer really goes out of his way to put some great stuff out there. He actually made a spot appearance at Ring of Honor this past week, out there, talk about Bully Ray, who, by the way, if nobody knows, Bully Ray is contemplating actually leaving in-ring competition. At the last set of Ring of Honor tapings, he took a really stiff table shot to the head, causing a massive concussion, and it sounds like it'd be better for him to walk away from wrestling at this time to focus on his health and getting better, and he just can't take the bumps anymore. You only have so many bumps you could take in a career. I remember Mick Foley saying that one time, and Bully Ray apparently is potentially taking his last bump. He came out at the Global Wars shows over the weekend, chokeslammed somebody through a table, brought a kid into the ring and gave him a piece of his last table he's going to break, and announced to everybody he was walking away from in-ring competition. I know that diehard fans in the wrestling world are hoping that that's not the case. The Bully Ray character has so much more to offer, but we got to respect the fact that the guy knows when to stop if he really is hurt the way it sounds like he is. So our thoughts and prayers are with Bully Ray. AJ Styles was in the news this week, had a great comment about how he would love to see the club reunite and take on the Shield. And I think that would be an interesting match if Gallows and Anderson were built up the right way. I think right now it would be a joke. Gallows and Anderson are pretty much a sidekick sideshow. They're nothing important. And I don't think you could legitimately sell them as a threat to the Shield the way you can Sheamus and Cesaro. So I would love to see the club reunite. I would love to see the clubs push like a top draw. Unfortunately, WWE didn't create them, so they don't know how to manufacture any more out of them because they have horrible booking. But the other thing AJ Styles said is that he wants to help Shane McMahon in his issues with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, clearly setting something up for the Survivor Series. I'm okay with this because it keeps AJ Styles relevant while we're waiting for him to get pushed right back into that World Championship picture, hopefully taking on Nakamura at WrestleMania. That's from what I understand, that's still the plan. But what would mess with that plan is the fact that Jinder Mahal has been telling people that he believes that he legitimately can break CM Punk's 434 World Championship Day reign. And I don't know if that's possible or not. I don't know if anybody would actually give him that kind of opportunity. But if they would, it would be very curious to see what the booking is like in the next few months if he's going to be someone who takes down that kind of record. Especially when he threw out a challenge to John Cena this week. It sounds like that's a match he wants to happen. We already know that was supposed to be in the works anyways. I'm hoping, I can't believe I'm going to say this, I'm actually hoping that Jinder Mahal gets that lengthy reign. I don't want to see him break CM Punk's record, but I would love to see him get a really long. Can you imagine if he got to like 433 days and lost the title? That way, Punk's reign record is still intact, but Jinder Mahal would really get a lot of heat from people if he was getting close to that record. That would be the case. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that. In an update on the WWE Conor McGregor situation, apparently it was reported that McGregor was in negotiations with WWE to make an appearance at WrestleMania. People all over the internet were going crazy for this right away, but apparently that is not the case. Dana White appeared on a morning talk show. He pulled out his cell phone and showed it to the interviewer, and it was a text message between he and Vince McMahon where he asked Vince about this situation, and Vince had no idea and said it may be a good thing down the line, but not right now. So clearly Vince had no idea what he was talking about. And then it comes to find out that the story was originally broken by the UK Sun, which is a spotty and questionable news source to begin with. So it sounds like the Conor McGregor thing not happening right now, maybe further down the line. CM Punk news. Apparently CM Punk is getting ready for his second mixed martial arts fight. He is in training for that fight. I don't know if he's had conversations with Dana White and if there's something in the works, but it sounds like that's something that could be happening very soon. I think that would be a great thing for Punk to get back into the ring. Look, I know there's a lot of people out there who think that that Punk really isn't suited for that. And I understand after his first performance, he didn't exactly set the world on fire. But what he did do is he had the guts and the tenacity to go out there and really try to put on a great show. And look, he doesn't want to, the man is determined. He loves mixed martial arts. He doesn't want to walk away from it without giving at least one more go around. And I fully expect him to get that one more fight. I think that would be the only way to do things fair, would be to have that happen. And I'm really hoping that this time, I don't know who they put him against. That's one of the problems. CM Punk, because of his limited experience, it's going to be very challenging to see him be viewed as a threat to somebody else. It doesn't sound like that's going to be something that's going to really be a selling point. The first time he was out, it made a huge pop to the ratings when he showed up and he took on Mickey Gall, and even though he lost relatively quickly, it really looked like his appearance was the driving force behind their their success on that pay-per-view. The next time, I don't think it's going to be like that. I think the problem the next time is going to be CM Punk is going to be looked at as a joke, and that's a problem. That's a real problem, because what you want is you want people to take it seriously. And right now, I don't think that's the case. I think no matter what you do, it's going to be a problem where CM Punk is going to be looked at as a really he's a sideshow. He's a side act, and that's really a shame, because CM Punk is so talented in the wrestling world. It really is a shame that he's not going to be taken more seriously. Moving on, Kurt Angle actually had some really interesting comments this week about the women's division. And what it boils down to is they want to have a women's elimination chamber match. And I'm fascinated by this, because for years the women never got into matches like that, cage match and stuff, because you were always worried about them getting a bad cut or something like that and ruining their perfect supermodel faces. And now that seems to not be the case. We had the Hell in a Cell last year, we had Money in the Bank this year, and it looks like we may have Elimination Chamber next year, which I would be a huge fan of. I think that's a great idea. It makes it look very much like the women's revolution is working. They're talking about a women's Royal Rumble, which we all are dying to see. I hope they do, because they'll be in Philadelphia, and I would love to know that night they're going to maximize how many people are there. But it's definitely something to keep our eyes on. And finally, for this episode, WrestleCade, the event that WWE is putting Starrcade out to compete with. So on November 25th, 26th, and 27th, I believe it is, WrestleCade 2017 will take place. And they have announced their main event for their biggest show of the weekend will be none other than former WWE wrestler Ryback taking on the incomparable former WCW NWA World Champion, as well as multiple other championships, and the founder of Impact Wrestling and Global Force Wrestling, Jeff Jarrett. What a bizarre main event, especially considering the situation Jeff Jarrett is in right now with Impact Wrestling. They said that he is no longer, he's taken an indefinite leave of absence, and I get that. I understand that, but the reality is that they're still hoping at some point that he would come back to the company. And now, with a booking like this, I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll have to wait and see. There is conversation that he still owns the Global Force Wrestling name, and that because of that, it's really going to be a tough situation for Impact Wrestling. But I don't buy that, because if anybody paid attention to the news this week, new championship belts are out, at least for Sienna and the Impact Wrestling Knockouts title, or women's title, or whatever you want to call it. It no longer says Global Force Wrestling. It says Impact Wrestling Women's Champion. So it looks like they're trying to move on from Global Force Wrestling, and that may be the end of GFW for Jeff Jarrett, because of his demons he's fighting right now. If you've never done it before, make sure you check out our website, the home of the Fro Wrestling Podcast, at www.frowrestling.com. If you want to become a member of the Fro Wrestling Podcast family on Patreon, go to patreon.com/FroWrestlingPodcast. We would love to have you. As I said at the onset of the show, all $25 contributors get an opportunity to host a Saturday Goin Live episode, and our $10 contributors will be in a drawing to see if one of them would be a lucky winner to be able to host an episode of a Saturday Night Live episode as well. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode, where we'll run down all the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks as always out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all of our music and sound effects that we use throughout today's show. Today's podcast was sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to frowrestling.com and clicking the icon in the middle of the page. And to AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade game needs. And while you're at it, don't forget to stop by our website at www.frolifeplanning for all your higher education needs, college, university, or just additional training necessary for that new career move you want to make. Fro Life Educational Planning specializes in helping you get to that next step in your career. Remember, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, go to www.thesportsjunkies, THA, sportsjunkies101.com for the latest articles on the world of professional wrestling. Until next episode, everybody take care and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.